Recently, it's been brought into sharp relief just how different an open world can be. And with the current march of technology, more and more games have huge worlds to explore. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at 3 games that all came out at around the same time, and compare how each one uses their open world. Now, before we start, and I set myself on fire on the internet, I'd like to state that all 3 of these games I like, and the criticisms I'm going to make are subjective based on my personal experience with them. So, the 3 games we're going to look at are Dragon's Dogma 2, Rise of the Ronin, and Outcast: A New Beginning. We'll start with movement, as an open world is nothing without some interesting way to get around it. As many a Spider-Man game has proven, a good movement system can save an entire game. Rise of the Ronin's movement is focused on being as useful and convenient as possible. The glider is simplistic, but allows for an easy, safe way to descend heights, and also fits neatly into the stealth combat. Meanwhile, the horse is fast, used in combat, although I don't think I've played a game that has good horse combat. I would much rather be fighting on foot. There is also a very easy fast travel system, so easy in fact I don't think there's anything particularly interesting to say about it. It just works. Dragon's Dogma's movement is the absolute opposite of Rise of the Ronin. It feels designed so that travelling is a pain in the arse. Now, on the surface, this sounds like an utterly awful idea, but I'm reminded of the phrase that comes up whenever I hear reviews of darker games. Games don't need to be fun, they need to be compelling. So, the big question, is Dragon's Dogma's moving compelling? Well, your options are walking or walking. But preparing for a long trek has a certain appeal, or maybe I'm just horribly dull. Saying walking is the only option isn't quite true. There's an ox cart network which serves to connect the major areas and keeps the more immersive style of the game going. And the fast travel system. Honestly, microtransactions aside, I think they should have cut it completely. As it stands, it's a janky immersion breaking mechanic that seems a little unnecessary. Outcast wins for its fun factor in its movements, but then again, a jetpack and a glider is a pretty easy sell. In the very early game, Outcast does suffer from a lack of options, as most of the movement skills need to be unlocked as you play. But a few hours in, you'll be jetpacking around and blatantly defying physics at every turn. The fast travel system is linked into the story and actually fits quite well with the mystic sci-fi vibe the game seems to be going for. On to the activities. An empty open world is nothing but a commute, and no one's ever met a happy commuter, so it's crucial there's some kind of activity. Rise of the Ronin has a very standard open world. If you've ever played a Sony exclusive game, you can take a guess how this is going to work. So yeah, strongholds to clear, one-off foes to hunt, and collectibles to find. While there's nothing wrong with the standard open world, it's just not that interested. I'm reminded of how I ended the last section about this game. It just works, but that is all it does. Meanwhile, Dragon's Dogma is again the antithesis to Rise of the Ronin. Quests can often just happen while travelling, and even main quests offer limited direction. And this is Dragon's Dogma's strength. The most fun you can have in Dragon's Dogma is just to pick a direction and get lost. Adventure will find you, and the most tense moments in the game are when you're caught far from safety and something big appears in your path. That moment of fight or flight instinct. These moments are what make Dragon's Dogma work, and probably also why the game could be a bit like Marmite. Players that miss the exciting moments due to not exploring, or even just bad luck by going in the wrong direction, are quite justified in calling the game slow. The first Outcast came out back in the 90s, and that older era of gaming is very much alive in its activities. A few different kinds of combat encounter litter the map and provide a fun distraction while you're travelling. But this game shows its classics roots in the time trial challenges, which make me incredibly nostalgic for the mid-noughties. Walk up to a shrine and you must prove your worth by running through hoops as fast as you can, which makes absolutely no sense, but I can't help but love a good excuse for a platforming challenge. Progression. No game is ever complete without some way for those ones and zeros to give us a reward. Rise of the Ronin, and you're going to start to notice a theme here, is very standard. So you guessed it, XP, weapons and armour. No complaints about this system, but again, that's all it does. It works, but nothing more. And these systems are getting very old and played out now. This is compounded by the usual Team Ninja staple of throwing insane amounts of gear like it's a dungeon crawler at you. And lacking the fantasy setting of the previous titles, I find I'm very rarely excited by anything this game gives me. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 for once isn't the opposite of Rise of the Ronin, taking its inspirations from somewhat more of a traditional Western RPG system, such as Skyrim or D&D. Still using a levelling system, but the individual jobs level up does add a bit of a twist, especially as learning new skills can completely change your playstyle. The loot system items are generally more meaningful, but progression can get a little linear as some items are just better in every way. Outcast is taking us back to the noughties again with a skill tree to unlock new abilities using resources that are gathered from activities, bringing back fond memories of those days when a game could have multiple currencies without one of them trying to break your bank balance. Where Outcast really shines is in its weapon mod system. Rewards for completing certain encounters, these completely change combat, and also feature a visual change for your gun which can make them look completely otherworldly with a full set of mods equipped. And finally, let's talk about exploration. After all, what's the point of a big world if there's nothing to see in it? Rise of the Ronin falls short here. It could be the historical setting not being as interesting to look at as fantasy or sci-fi, but I never really found myself spotting something interesting in the distance and heading straight in that direction. Exploration functions mostly as a means to link the various activities in the world, and as such doesn't hold up too well on its own. Exploration is the big strength of Dragon's Dogma, and while the understated art style means I'm never left speechless by any of the vistas, the very meaningful loot system means anything I spot in the distance I want to investigate. Dragon's Dogma is built around preparing for trekking across its incredibly hostile world and stumbling into interesting paths, and finding anything becomes far more interesting when you're hopelessly lost. Outcast has strange alien sights, and the world is well realised whilst you're travelling across it at Mach 10. There's always some strange looking plant or structure to catch your eye. But similar to Rise of the Ronin, exploration isn't really centralised and serves as a means to connect activities. The settings and art design are definitely more interesting to look at, but are merely a cosmetic change. As I've been comparing these games throughout this video, I thought I'd better offer an opinion at the end. As I stated at the start, I actually enjoy all of them, so what I'm going to do is describe how I would recommend each one. Rise of the Ronin is a really easy recommendation, assuming you're not completely against open worlds or the Japan setting. You'll find plenty of fun in the game, but it really isn't the world that provides it. The combats get substantially more complicated after the first chapter, and me, being both a weeb and a history nerd, the story has definitely grabbed me. But I find historical politics interesting, so maybe I'm just a bit weird. Dragon's Dogma is the hardest of the three to recommend, but that's not because it's bad. There are definitely a lot of players out there that will be put off by its more obtuse game design. So my recommendation comes with the following disclaimer. You'll enjoy Dragon's Dogma if the thought of being hopelessly lost in a world that wants you dead sounds fun, go for it. And maybe you have a few masochistic tendencies, but who am I to judge? Outcast has a simple divide. If you're old enough to have nostalgia for the late 90s, early noughties period of gaming, and have ever enjoyed a cheesy B-movie, you'll enjoy Outcast. Just lower your expectations and enjoy the silliness. What it lacks in realism, it makes up for in completely illogical gameplay contrivance. Ah, I miss the PS2 era. Now that I'm done rambling, hit all the buttons everyone on the internet tells you to, and you never know, I might get around to making more videos before Entropy gets to the universe.